everyone. So my dad and my mom have read to me ever since I was really little, and they used to take me to the library every week, and there were quite a collection of books that we ended up going through, and I've done my due diligence, and my dad has done his due diligence to collect all of those books. So I know that there are parents out there who are working really hard and they don't have the extra time to read to their kids the way that they would want to. So my dad and I have decided that we would read through all of these different stories and be able to share them with you. So here we go.
So the first story we'll share is called Tam Lin by Jane Yolen and Charles McCulloch. And it is a Scottish ballad written in 1990, and the illustrations in the book were done in watercolor and colored pencil and diazo prints. So we'll read the story and then we'll share the images on the pages. Okay? So, Tam Lin, Scottish ballad. There was once a strange, forbidding castle with ruined towers on a weedy piece of land called Carterhaugh. Many years had passed since humans lived there. It had been the most beautiful home in the land, and now all the children were warned against it. Do not go down to Carterhaugh, said their mothers and nurses. There is an awful smell to the place. There are prickers and briars, thistles and thorns. Do not go down to Carterhaugh, said their fathers and tutors. There are terrible shadows and odd, harsh cries in the undergrowth. Oh, do not go down to Carterhaugh. The younger children listened to the warnings, but some of the older boys went secretly on dares, leaving tokens of their passing, garlands or rings, and once a fine green mantle. There was an awful smell to the place, like apples gone bad or dead mice in the walls, or dirty water in an unused well, and there were moving shadows where no shadows should be. Those few who went to visit Carterhaugh did not stay long, and they had bad dreams for many nights after. Now there was one girl, Janet Mackenzie, who had skin the color of new cream and hair the red gold of a sunrise, and Janet laughed at all of them. Are you brave boys afraid of shadows and smells? She asked. I am not afraid. Besides, my father's father owned Carterhaugh. It should be mine by right, though I am not allowed to claim it. Mackenzies should rule that land, and Mackenzie voices should fill the halls of that castle. When I am old enough, claim it I will. Well, her mother cautioned her to be silent, and her father wept openly when she said she would go. They loved their only child dearly, and they were truly afraid for her. Our home is in the village now, they said, and that is good enough for us. But Janet always had a mind of her own, even as a wee girl. The villagers all said she would never marry, no matter that her father was chief of the clan. No man would want her, even for all her beauty and her father's name, for she always spoke what she thought, and what she thought was never quite proper for a fine young lady. I will go, Janet said, for I am not afraid. I will go when I am old enough to win back Carterhaugh for our clan. On the day she turned 16, the day she came into her inheritance, Janet twisted her long red gold hair braid and pinned it to the top of her head. She put on her brand new birthday gown, as green as young willow. She fastened the Mackenzie plaid across her shoulder and secured it with a golden brooch. And then she went down the stairs to greet her guests. She laughed and she danced as if this birthday were like any other, but though she fooled her friends, she did not fool her parents. Do not go down to Carterhaugh, they begged her. Her father nervously turned the great ruby ring in his finger, and her mother crushed a pale rosebud in her hand. That land no longer belongs to the Mackenzies, girl. It belongs to the fair folk. Now, the fairies, the fae. Nothing lives there but ghosts and boggles and wicked things. Do not go, Janet, do not go. But as soon as the party was over, and the last of the guests' horses had gone down the long winding road, Jeanette pulled the plaid up over her hair, and she put on her walking shoes, tucked her skirts above her knees, and bounded up and over the heathery hills toward the tumble-down towers of Carter Howe. There's her mother and father saying, "Do not go, Jeanette, do not go." What do you suppose Jeanette's going to find at Carter Howe? By the time she was close enough to see the walls, the sun was at the level of the hilltops, and by the time she was standing by the broken door, the sun was behind the hills. Night birds called mournfully from the nearest trees. The shadows of briars seemed sharper than the briars themselves. The only spot of color besides Jeanette's green gown and plaid and her red gold hair was on a bush grown by the ruined door. A single rose bloomed there, the color of spilled blood. Jeanette was afraid, but she would not show it. In a voice that was strong, though the echo of it trembled, she called out, "Today I have come into my inheritance. Today by law I can claim what is my own. This house and this land belonged to my father's father's father and was stolen from him by the Fae. Its great beauty has been destroyed, so I take this rose, the only thing of beauty left here, as my pledge. I shall take back Carter Howe from the Fae and restore it to the humankind." And she bent over and plucked the rose, heedless of the pricking thorns. But as the rose stalk bent and broke, a great wind suddenly blew across the clearing, whistling over the broken stones. A single flash of lightning lit the evening sky, and standing in front of her where a moment before no one had been, was a young man dressed in a velvet kilt. In velvet and kilt, he was as handsome as the Prince of the Fae. It's Jeanette in her plaid. Mackenzie plaid. "Who is it who pulls the rose and calls me back to the world of men?" His voice was hollow, sounding as if it came from far away. Startled, Jeanette could not answer. The young man spoke again, his voice sounding fuller this time. "Who calls me back from the land of the ever fair?" At that, Jeanette recovered her wits and laughed. "There is no land of the ever fair, no country of the Fae. It is but a nursery tale. We live in this world side by side, and the Fae are thieves. We all grow old in time." Well, the young man sighed. "Oh, I too once believed that, but as I was riding on a summer's eve near the house of my father's friend, the Laird Mackenzie, my horse shied, and I fell off. I must have hit my head, for I lay in a faint upon the hillside. The Queen of the Fae found me and took me inside the green hill, and I have lived there ever since. Believe me, in the land of the Fae there is no old age, and there is no natural death." And he stopped abruptly. "How long is ever since?" Jeanette asked. "You do not look older than I, and I am 16 today." "Alas, child, I am 10 times 16, older than the oldest man alive outside the hill." Jeanette smiled. "Oh, that cannot be. Your face is young, your limbs are strong, and you are fair. What is your name?" "I am called Tam Lin," he said. "Tam Lin? But that was the name of a boy who disappeared when my father's father was still alive," Jeanette said, and he nodded. "When I rode off that summer's day, this house stood upright and unbroken." He gestured to the ruins. Jeanette went over to him and put the rose in his hand. "Well, Tam Lin, that house shall stand upright and tall again, for my name is Jeanette Mackenzie, and the house is rightfully mine." And Tam Lin laughed, but it was a rusty sound, as if he had not laughed for a long time. "That I should like to see," he said, kissing her hand. "I promise you I shall." But Tam Lin's face grew long and sad. "After this Hallows Eve, I shall see nothing ever again. His hand still held hers, but his fingers had grown cold as snow. This Saturday night? Jeanette asked, but why? Are you ill? Or have you done something wicked from which you must hang? Neither and both, Jeanette. This Halloween, as on all solstice nights, the human world and the fairy world sit side by side. The moonlight is the only door between them, and through that door the Fae can cross at will, over the moors, past Selkirk town, down to Miles Cross where the holy well stands. The Fae shall ride this Hallows Eve, and I shall ride with them as I have done every 7 years since the day they stole me away. And he shivered and took his hand from hers. So every 7 years, he rides with the Fae. She wondered that she had missed that hand so cold and strong in hers. What is wrong with that riding? He stared at the sky. The moon stood high above them, and his face was cast in silver, like a mask in a mummer's play. Every 7 years, Jeanette, the Fae kill one of their human captives. It is their tithe to hell. And for 7 years, 7 times 7 years, and 7 years again, I have not been the one chosen, for the Queen has loved me well. But now she loves another, and this Hallows Eve, I am to be the sacrifice. Jeanette felt her heart stop. Tears started in her eyes. Can you run, Tam Lin? I cannot. Can no one save you? None. No one at all? Only my true human love, he said. But alas, all who love me are long dead, and the grass is growing over their graves. Well, then I shall love you, Jeanette cried, or die as I try. If no one else in this human world loves you, then I must. Tam Lin took her in his arms and told her what she must do, and his words were like kisses, cold, distant, fierce. On Hallows Eve, Jeanette stole away from her house, and she wore a skirt and bodice as red as human blood. And over her head and shoulders she wore a mantle as green as grass, so that the Fae might not see her, for green was the Fae's own color. In her left pocket she carried earth from the garden at the home, and in her right a bottle of holy water she had begged from the priest, and as Tam Lin had told her to bring. She crept over the hills to Miles Cross and shivered as she crouched by the well. In the dark her hair was no longer like sunrise, but the color of dusk after the sun is set. All about her was a great white mist, and she could see nothing beyond the crossroads, not the path, nor the trees on either side, nor the canopy of the sky. A long, long time she waited, afraid to move, and then the great bell in the Selkirk Tower tolled 12. When the last low note had faded away, Jeanette heard an answering ring from far away down the road, high and jangling. Turning toward the sound, she waited as the white moonlit mist parted, like a huge door opening, and through it rode the fairy troops. The bells and the horses' harnesses rang out with every step, and all about them was an unearthly light. Jeanette remembered Tam Lin's instructions, and she let the first horse pass her by. It was black as coal, black as the pit's bottom, black as death. And on its back was a human man as tall and fair as a prince, but his face was long, and he did not smile. And then Jeanette made ready to stand, but she recalled what Tam Lin had told her, and she let the second horse go by as well. It was as brown as oak wood, brown as old blood, brown as the earth in a grave. On its back was a human man as tall and as fair as a king, but his face too was long, and he did not smile. And then before she could stand, the third horse came by. It was white as snow, white as the froth on the waves, white as the milk on the mouth of a babe. On this horse sat a human man who was as tall and as fair as a saint. And though his face was long, around his mouth played a ghost of a smile. "Tam Lin!" Jeanette cried out. She leaped from her place behind the well, ran over to the white horse, pulled down the rider, and held him fast in her arms. Horse is black as coal. Next horse brown. Tam Lin's horse white. In an instant, the fairy troops surrounded them. The horses were bridled in gold and shod in silver, and on each one's head shone a bright jewel. The riders of the Fae were all tall and stern, but the tallest and the sternest was the fairy queen. Her dress was of green, all of the greens of the forest, and her white hair hung in 100 braids down her back. "Give me Tam Lin," cried the fairy queen, "and I shall give you all the gold and silver you see here." Jeanette shook her head. "I have enough gold in my mother's hair and silver in my father's," she said. "I need none of yours." "Give me Tam Lin," cried the queen, "and I shall give you the jewels on my horses' heads." And Jeanette smiled. "The only jewels I need shine in my true love's eyes." The queen stared at Jeanette as if reading her soul. And then she cried out, "Give me Tam Lin, and I shall return to you your Carter How." Well, for a moment, only a moment, Jeanette was silent with thought, her mind filled with the beauty of the house, not as it would be, but as it once had been. Then she shook her head to cast off the queen's enchantment and laughed. "I shall have Carter How whether you will it or not, O queen. Whatever you do, I shall hold tight to both Tam Lin and Carter How." And the queen with 100 braids. The queen rose up in her stirrups, and her face was grim. She pointed her hand at Jeanette, and a great cold light poured from her fingertips. "You do not hold Tam Lin even now," she cried. And with a great wrenching twist, Tam Lin almost tore from Jeanette's arms. And when she looked at him, he had turned into a hideous serpent with lidless eyes and thousands of gray-green scales. But Jeanette held on, though she closed her eyes at the sight. The fairy queen spoke again. "What do you hold now, Jeanette?" The long serpent twisted around her. She felt a hot breath in her face and sharp claws in her breast. When she opened her eyes, there was a lion's head behind her, its teeth bared. But still Jeanette held on. "And what do you hold now, human girl?" asked the queen. And the lion shrank, its gold mane flaring into tendrils of flame. Its warm body grew fiery hot. And now she held a burning brand that she would not let go. Heedless of the fire that seared her, Jeanette ran to the well, and at the last moment she threw the brand in. And then she took the bottle of holy water from her pocket and sprinkled it over the well and herself. At once the fire went out, and Tam Lin climbed from the well. His fairy clothing had been burned away, so he stood in nothing but his human skin. Jeanette threw her mantle over him and turned toward the queen. "The earth," Tam Lin whispered urgently. "Don't forget the earth." And then Jeanette remembered. She put her hand into her pocket and drew out the brown garden earth, sprinkling it in a great circle around them, a circle of protection against the power of the Fae. "Done," she whispered back. Then hand in hand they faced the queen. "Curse you, Jeanette Mackenzie," screamed the fairy queen, "and curses on your hall. And as for you, Tam Lin, if I had foreseen your treachery, I would have plucked out your human eyes and heart and given you ones of wood." But Tam Lin laughed. "We stand here protected by a circle of earth, with holy water upon our heads. Your curses return from us to thee, O Queen of the Ever Fair. And look," he pointed to the horizon where the sun was just dawning, "your power is over. Begone." The queen and her troop turned back through the mist and rode silently away over the moonlight like so many shadows. And though Jeanette listened for a long, long time, she heard no more fairy bells. No more fairy bells. And so Jeanette and Tam Lin were married. It is said in Selkirk that they lived a long and happy life together in a great stone castle. Jeanette restored and renamed Carter Hall, and that their children's children's children lived there happily ever after. But whether this is true or not, who can say? Only those with pure hearts, ready laughs, and a memory of mist on the moonlight road know for sure. And as for them, they are long in their quiet, grassy graves. I hope you enjoyed that.
And stay tuned for more.
We'll be reading stories from all around the world. The Ballad of Tam Lin is one of the most ancient and popular of the Scottish ballads. It's first mentioned in a ballad book in 1549. Yet there are many versions that will be sung today, and we might sing that next time. Tam Lin by Jane Yolen and Charles McCulloch.
Thank you, Dad.
Thank you, dear.